I got into studying Bach's music because I find it really mysterious. Bach as a character, I think, is mysterious, but also the music itself. It's very unusual for its time. And if you look at the music that Bach composed and the music that these other composers produced, it is really quite different. The other composers can, for the most part, be grouped together, that what they were doing was much more similar to one another than what Bach was doing. Bach's music is really very unusual in lots of ways. For one thing, it's always longer, or almost always longer. If you have a four-line aria text, Graupner or Telemann will set it, and it takes 3 minutes to play the aria, and Bach will write it, and it'll take 5.5 minutes to play. It's a very normal thing that you see very, very consistently with Bach in all genres, not just arias, not just cantata movements or choruses, but also organ works and concertos and suites and really every genre. Bach always wrote music that took much longer to play than anyone else. And the question is why? And I think the answer, if you look at the music again, is that Bach was unwilling to compromise. He wanted to exploit and explore the musical ideas that he came up with to the absolute utmost. That he was not content he was not satisfied with a piece of music until he felt like he'd done that. And it was not ready to be over until he had done that in a very systematic and careful way. Bach also exploits the instruments and the voices to their fullest potential, so that Bach's music is almost always more difficult to sing, it's more difficult to perform than the music of his contemporaries. Not just because it's longer and it takes more endurance, but actually the vocal writing is very often kind of instrumental in character and difficult to sing. Another thing about Bach's music that's very striking is the variety, so that Bach just seems to have had a more fertile imagination than his contemporaries. And that every time he started a piece of music, he had an idea, and he held himself to very, very high standards. So what kind of a person was Bach? What kind of a person would be interested so consistently in challenging his audience and challenging his players? Bach seems to have valued hard work above everything else. Bach had his little, what we can imagine as a kind of a refuge, his Komponierstube, that is in his apartments in the Thomasschule. He had a special room where he composed and where he probably had his music library as well. He may at some points have had students in there helping him to copy the music, because his students were the ones that did that kind of hard labor. But there were undoubtedly many days, hours, weeks perhaps on end that Bach spent in this room alone composing his music, and all the things that go with composing music: mixing the ink, cutting the paper, preparing the paper, putting the staff lines on the page, all the things that we take for granted now and composers don't have to deal with, Bach had to deal with, and sharpening his quill pens and actually putting this music, putting his ideas down on paper. But somehow he rose to the challenge, and he was able to compose all the music that we know today, and much of it was composed in a very hurried way, but that he somehow managed never to lower his standards. I mean, some pieces by Bach are better than other pieces by Bach, but even the worst pieces by Bach, in his, at least by mature Bach, are extremely interesting, and much more interesting than the vast majority of works by his contemporaries, or many of his contemporaries anyway. In the last decade of his life or so, Bach seems to have turned to writing music that was not as directly connected with specific performances or specific performing circumstances. Works like the Art of the Fugue and the B minor Mass. These are works that he apparently wrote for himself. But I would argue actually that Bach wrote all of his music really for himself, or certainly the vast majority of music for himself. Even secular cantatas that he wrote for one prince or another for somebody's birthday. these works were ultimately written also for himself. He had his own standards that were much, much higher than the standards that anyone else held him to. And that's really the unusual thing, I think, about Bach as a character. And the thing that is fascinating is that he had his own standards.